Coming up this time, a former Home Secretary and the law according to Clough.
He was very much a law and order man, very much a kind of, a believer in the dignity of the working man. And so, I think most people would have thought, good on you, Cloughie.
Plus, more great memories.
And what Cloughie did was take a team called Hartlepool United, who inevitably finished in those bottom places.
Yes.
And took him to promotion to the third division. And I always say, when people say to me what a great manager Pep Guardiola is, or what a great manager, put him in charge of Hartlepool United and see how they get on.
All that and a lot more coming up on this episode.
The 70s was a very dark period for English football, whoever was put in as the manager. And, I was one of those many people who was kind of screaming at the radio or the telly, appoint Brian Clough. I'm absolutely convinced he would have done a better job than, say, Don Revie or even some of the more, successful managers.
Welcome along to The Green Jumper with myself, Marcus Alton, the editor of the tribute website brianclough.com. Now, Cloughie is often described as the best manager England never had. And my guest today is a man who's been referred to as the best Prime Minister we never had. It's hello to the former Home Secretary and now best-selling author, Alan Johnson. Hello.
Hi, Marcus. How are you?
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks for joining us today. Now, when we met a little while back for an interview at Loudon Book Festival, I remember giving you a few multiple choice questions in the warm-up. It was things like fish and chips or curry, Coronation Street or EastEnders, and one of the questions was Brian Clough or Alex Ferguson, and you went for Cloughie, thankfully. What was it about Brian Clough that made you give that answer?
He was such a big figure. He was so articulate, so intelligent, and so successful. I think Alex Ferguson is great, and he did good things with the Scottish League team even before Aberdeen.
Yes,
and well before Manchester United. But I focused on Cloughie because I was a huge football fan, and unlike some of my friends who supported the big teams and never looked any lower than what was then the first division, the top league, I was always interested in all 92 teams in all four leagues. And in those days, if you finished in the bottom of the fourth division, you weren't automatically relegated. You had to apply for re-election, and generally you got re-elected. And when a team didn't and went out of the league, it was a big thing. I remember when it happened to Accrington Stanley when I was a kid, and when it happened to Gateshead before, when I was very small. And what Cloughie did was take a team called Hartlepool United, who inevitably finished in those bottom places, and took them to promotion to the third division. And I always say, when people say to me what a great manager Pep Guardiola is, or what a great manager, put him in charge of Hartlepool United and see how they get on. But with Cloughie, that was a huge achievement, and he was on my radar well before Derby County and Nottingham Forest because of that. What I saw as a huge achievement as a football fan.
Yes, it's true what he achieved with scant resources. It would be interesting to see that the managers of today try and deal with that.
Yeah.
And of course, Cloughie was a big supporter of the Labour Party over the years. Did you ever get the chance to meet him in any capacity?
No, I wish I had, but no, he's probably before my time. I mean, in the 70s, I was a young local union official, and by the 90s, when I was a national union official, he wasn't the kind of all-pervading figure that he had, because he did dominate football, to a huge extent. In his heyday. But no, I wish I had. I'd love to have met him. He seemed to me a fascinating character.
Yes.
Even if you didn't like football, you'd have an interesting conversation with Cloughie.
Yeah, he could talk about all kinds of things. That's right.
Yeah.
I organised the campaign for a knighthood for Brian in the early 2000s when Labour was in power. It didn't happen for various reasons, despite the support of his local MP, Bob Laxton, the Labour MP for Derby North at that time. Would you have supported the idea of a knighthood for Cloughie? He'd accepted the OBE.
Yeah. I would have done. I mean, not least of all because Bob Laxton was my friend. We came from the same union, the Communication Workers Union. So Bob would have twisted my arm anyway, I'm sure. But no, if anyone deserved it, it was Cloughie. I mean, you know better than I, Marcus, about Cloughie. I kind of had a feeling that he didn't want a knighthood, but I'm probably wrong. If he accepted an OBE, probably he would have accepted a knighthood. But he always struck me as a very down-to-earth person who was quite happy being plain old Brian Clough.
Yes.
Rather than Sir. And I don't know whether Sir Brian Clough would have suited him, actually.
Yes.
With all due respect to your campaign. You know, he seemed to me very much a man of the terraces.
There is that aspect to it, but from what I've heard from sort of various sources, he would have accepted it more for Barbara, his wife, as a sort of symbol of her support. But yeah, as I say, it didn't happen at the time. But over the years, Brian supported a lot of Labour candidates in general election campaigns, and I think when he was in the Northeast, he even attended a rally for Harold Wilson once. And you've written a short biography of him. Do you think Cloughie would have made a good politician?
Definitely. His not just his eloquence, which many politicians have, but quite a few don't. His interest in public affairs, his real, genuine compassion. He wouldn't dress it up as any ideology. Doubt if he spoke much about socialism or any isms, but he had a natural affinity with the underdog. And given that the Labour Party, all it really is about greater equality and the abolition and the eradication of poverty, that everything else are means towards those ends, I think those were two issues that he cared about a lot.
Yeah.
And I think it'd have been a really, really good first-rate politician, I think.
And also as an orator as well. I mean, former players say it wasn't always what he said, it was the way he said it that made a difference.
Yes, that's true. And, he was one of the first television pundits. I remember I was a postman in 1970, and it's the World Cup in South America, Mexico, wasn't it, I think? Yeah. And we were the holders, and, we were very much favourites to win it again. But the television pictures were on at kind of 8 o'clock in the morning. And you don't tell the post office this because it's probably an offence, but I used to nip home before I started my rounds to get the kind of television coverage, which was, kind of 3 hours after I'd started work at 5 a.m., but before I started my delivery to the poor people of Burnham who got their mail a little bit later through that period. Anyway, I always remember they had sitting on stalls 4 commentators, and I don't think it had ever been done before. I don't think they'd ever had talking heads on
in that style.
The Alan Hansen, Gary Lineker now Match of the Day kind of thing. Yes. I think that was the first in that World Cup. And I remember one of them was Derek Dugan. I remember another one was Malcolm Allison. I think the third one was Jimmy Hill, and the fourth one was Brian Clough. And he was the one you wanted to listen to because he had that ability to kind of...
Yes.
So you're right. He would have been a good orator in Parliament, I think, but he also was one of the first football people to come across the television screen and to actually, connect with people in their living rooms.
Yes, yeah, it was definitely box office. You're a Queen's Park Rangers fan, and of course, Cloughie's Forest and QPR had a few good battles over the years. How did you come to support them?
It's my local team in North Kensington.
Right.
So I was born in London, West End. And if you're in London West 10, West 11 or West 12, which is where Shepherd's Bush is, you're a Rangers fan. Or if you come from Acton, or if you come from that area around West London.
Yeah.
I mean, it was I went to school in Chelsea, to quite a posh grammar school, and it was the height of Tommy Docherty's Chelsea, with Barry Bridges and Terry Venables, these great players.
Yeah.
And I got ribbed a lot because I was supporting this little third division team. Rangers and Brentford were the poor relations.
Right.
Fulham and Chelsea in West London were
the big
top
ones.
league. Where they were the big ones. Johnny Haynes and all that at Fulham, and the stars I've mentioned at Chelsea. So Rangers really, weren't in the picture. They were constant third division. They'd been promoted once to the second division. Season everyone will remember, 1947-48, and came down again about 3 or 4 years later, and so stayed there. They'd never reached the top division at all. But they were my local team. Yeah. And I started watching them when I was 8 against Bournemouth and Boscombe Athletic, as they were called then. Yeah. I mean, look at Bournemouth now. They're kind of in the Premiership. Rangers are bottom of the Championship. But, it would be very boring following a team that won all the time.
Yes, exactly. You got to have the downs to appreciate the ups. That's what they say.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I was looking back in the records, and of course, Trevor Francis, former Forest player, went on to manage QPR briefly when they were in,
and played for us
in
as
Division
well.
One. Yeah. And he'd taken over, I think, from Jim Smith, who'd gone to Newcastle, but he didn't have a great deal of luck, did he? There was a lot of injuries and suspensions, from what I can tell, in the early weeks. And I know in his programme notes, I've got the programme here from February 89, Forest events QPR, and Clough said Francis hadn't had the easiest introductions to management, but all the problems would stand him in good stead for the future. Do you remember much of that period?
That era? No, not really. I don't know how long he was there or whether he went on to manage.
He was only there for about a year, I think. He wasn't there that long. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I remember Francis mainly as a player. And I remember that when he was the kind of wonder kid of Birmingham City, where everyone was talking about Trevor Francis, we had our own wonder kid, Jerry Francis, at QPR, who went on to become England captain and I think played with Trevor. I think they were contemporaries, round about the same age.
Yes.
So we had our own Jerry, who I think by the time Trevor came and played for us, I'm not sure whether Jerry Francis was still with us, but I remember him as a player. I mean, he was probably the quickest player on 2 feet. Yeah. And like many great players, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a great manager. We all know that. Cloughie was a great player. I mean, his goal scoring record, I think, has been matched by very few. It was kind of Jimmy Greaves level, more than a goal a game. I never saw him play. That was kind of before I was really watching top league football. I was a kind of third division South, I think, at the time, watching that kind of stuff. Yeah. But he, I think, proved, although he was a good player, he didn't become a renowned international. He had a lot of bad luck and injuries, Brian Clough.
Yes.
I think Trevor Francis was the opposite. He was a wonderful world-class player, probably not a world-class manager.
And another link with QPR, of course, was Stan Bowles. He joined Cloughie at Forest, but it never really worked out for him. He did win the European Super Cup with Forest, but I don't think he liked being told to pass it to John Robertson because he wanted to create some of his own magic, I think. So it was a bit of a surprise, really. He was the type of maverick that even Cloughie couldn't, fully tame in the end. Yeah.
Well, Stan, in the great QPR debate about who was our best number 10, and of course it started with Rodney Marsh. Stan Bowles came along then, brought him from Carlisle. But we've had Roy Wegerle, we've had, right up to Abariche Eze, who we sold to Crystal Palace. We've had great ball-playing number 10s throughout all that period. And Stan was one of them. I think he was past his best by the time Cloughie signed.
Another match that springs to mind is Littlewoods Cup quarter-final. Forest beat QPR 5-2. It wasn't so much what happened during the game, but afterwards that got the headlines when Cloughie was caught thumping a couple of fans who'd strayed onto the pitch. And,
I remember that.
Yeah, and he apologised and said, it shouldn't have happened. But even the local chief constable said it's a big man who can apologise and admit his mistake, because Cloughie was a big supporter of the police and that they supported him on that occasion. But yes, that was... we
were just talking before we came on, Marcus, about my colleague and friend from Hull, John Prescott, who was famous for that punch.
Yes.
And when people saw that kid half his age, that young man half John's age, he was 63 at the time, assault him and push that egg into the back of his head, and John turned around and gave him a straight left.
Yep.
The public actually thought, well, good on you.
Yep.
He didn't come, just like Cloughie, Prescott didn't come from a background where you just turn the other cheek. And I'm not sure, I remember the headlines about that incident, but I don't know what those fans were doing, on the pitch. I don't know how big they were, whatever. But Clough, like Prescott, was from a working class background, and he wasn't going to, mince his words. And he believed very, very firmly, as most working class communities do, that actually, that behaviour is totally unacceptable. And it's kind of, in a way, it besmirches the working classes to see people act in that way. He was very much a law and order man.
He was
very much a kind of, a believer in the dignity of the working man. And so, I think most people would have thought, good on you, Cloughie.
Yeah. Well, they kissed and made up later, the two young lads and Cloughie, which was nice to see. I think they'd just sort of strayed onto the pitch at the end of the game, and Cloughie always looked at it as his workspace, and he didn't like people invading it. But I know, to turn things round, one of his ways of relaxing was reading detective stories, and specifically the Raymond Chandler books about the private detective Philip Marlowe. Now, as a writer of murder mysteries yourself now, in particular the great Louise Mangan books, is that something you can relate to, that sort of escapism?
Oh, definitely. And strangely enough, I went back to Philip Marlowe novels, the Raymond Chandler books, about 3 or 4 years ago during lockdown, and I was writing The Late Train to Gypsy Hill, which is currently being dramatised by BBC Studios, by the way, Marcus.
Oh, great.
So that's great.
Yeah.
My first Louise Mangan novel.
Yeah.
So I was reading a lot of detective stuff. I've always read the Maigret books by Georges Simenon, but I kind of stopped reading some of the other Agatha Christie's, Leslie Charteris and all that, and I went back to them. The first one I picked up was The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler, and it just reminded me what a master of the genre he was. So I've had a good chinwag with Brian Clough. I mean, I knew he was a reader. I didn't know he was an enthusiast for detective stories.
Yes. He said, in fact, in one interview, he would love to have been a private detective with a dirty desk and dirty office and operating in the big sleep, as you say. He thought that there was great detail in Chandler's books. Is there a knack, do you think, to setting that scene for the reader and then taking them on all the twists and turns that they're not expecting?
Yes, definitely. But, I mean, the first rule, and the one that Raymond Chandler always followed, was you have to engage your reader first. They have to be interested in your characters. You have to have created a world that they can believe, although it's entirely fictional. And then you can bring in the twists and the turns. I think some writers make the mistake of thinking it's all about the twists and turns. It's all about the great reveal. But it's not. It's like any other form of literature. And I think Georges Simenon, should have won the Nobel Prize for Literature. His books were very literate. And so were Raymond Chandler's. Even without that kind of twists and turns, you enjoyed his style of writing. Incidentally, he was a public school boy here in England. He went to Dulwich College. I mean, he was very American, and he's associated with that American genre.
Yes.
But for some reason, I'm not sure of the background to it, he was definitely American and not English.
Yeah.
He went to Dulwich College, public school in London.
And talking about all the books, I've enjoyed the characters and getting to know the characters in your books. Have you got another one in the pipeline?
Yeah, I'm just right now. It's so I've done with Louise. I did 3 books. It was a trilogy. That's what I was commissioned to write. And we'll see how the TV series goes when it comes out. I might write a few more, but I wanted a complete change. So I've gone to 1939. It's set, run up to war. I don't know what it's going to be called yet, but it's set near where I live on somewhere called the Isle of Axholme, which people from East Midlands might know, but more familiar if you live around the Doncaster, South Yorkshire area or North Lincolnshire. So it's set there. It's a new detective called Charlie Fry. So I will spend the winter hibernating, writing that. And by next spring, I hope, I've got a publication date.
Fingers crossed. That's fantastic. Yeah, good news. Just a couple of minutes left. I mentioned at the start, Cloughie is often described as the best England manager we never had. Do you think he would have made a good England boss?
Yes, I was vociferous, on my saloon bar stool at the time when you were having a pint and the discussion was, how do we rescue England? You have to remember that after Ramsey and after that 1970 World Cup final when we got knocked out by West Germany, we couldn't qualify for anything for a long time. The 70s was a very dark period for English football, whoever was put in as the manager. And, I was one of those many people who was kind of screaming at the radio or the telly, appoint Brian Clough. I'm absolutely convinced he would have done a better job than, say, Don Revie or even some of the more successful managers, Ron Greenwood, etc. He was such a force, such a magnet for these, personalities that come in as great footballers. He could mould them into a team. And you only have to look at what he did with Forest, with people like John McGovern, who weren't brilliant footballers, but God, he was brilliant for Nottingham Forest.
Yeah.
John Robertson was brilliant. O'Neill and Roy Keane were brilliant players, but what he took basically a squad of players that weren't going to break into the Real Madrid team and turn them into European Cup winners. I mean, it's an amazing success, and I think he would have wanted as well. That would have crowned his career to be a manager. He's very patriotic.
I always say he concentrated on what players could do rather than what they couldn't do and let them express themselves, which would have worked. Well, Alan Johnson, thanks very much for joining us today. I've really enjoyed reading your crime novels, of course, and can't wait until the next one. And I think Cloughie might have enjoyed them as well. Thanks again and all the best.
Thank you, Marcus. It's been great to be with you.
And thanks to you for listening. And I hope you can vote for the Green Jumper in the final of the Global Sports Podcast Awards after we were shortlisted by a panel of industry experts. Yes, from humble beginnings in a spare bedroom, we're now up against some of the big names who have major corporate support. But Cloughie himself championed the underdog, so I hope you can too by voting online for the Green Jumper. The link is in the show notes. Whatever happens, the Green Jumper is in the top 12 of football podcasts worldwide, and I must thank you for helping to make that possible. To use a Cloughie phrase, it may not be the best football podcast in the business, but it's in the top one. I hope you can join me next time for more memories of the great man in the Green Jumper.